Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobin, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Well, good evening. Welcome into the Toasted Tavern. My name is Michael Wag Connect. Going to be joined here shortly by my co-host Scott Tobin to recap what went down in week one of the NFL. We'll also touch on the Mizzou Kansas game from yesterday, living up to the hype that was put out there leading up to the game, as well as talk a little bit about the Cardinals, a team that somehow, some way is not dead in the playoff race, although it's still a very, very outside chance that they find a way into the playoffs, but still doing stuff at the end of the year to keep them in the conversation. But we're going to start things off with some NFL talk. It's officially week one. We had a game on Thursday night. We had a game on Friday night. And we've got a huge slate of games that went down today. And we've got a blockbuster going on right now in Buffalo between the Ravens and the Bills. Derrick Henry just notched his first touchdown of the season to give Baltimore a 10-7 lead in what should be an absolutely incredible Sunday night matchup. And then Monday night, we've got Minnesota and Chicago wrapping up week one. But let's talk about the games that went down earlier today. It was a very interesting group of games, especially the early games. We had some missed field goals. We had some teams that started off great offensively and then just kind of went away and yet still found a way to win games. We had some surprises. We had a very, very intriguing matchup up in New York, not just the Giants game against Washington, but we're talking about the Jets and Pittsburgh. And I'll go ahead and bring in my co-host, Scott Tobin, to talk a little bit about that. We're going to start with the Jets and the Steelers. I think that one in the early slate of games was probably the marquee one of the afternoon when you've got Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh, his first game, and he's going back to New York, a place that he was at last year. And it ended up becoming an incredibly good game between him and Justin Fields. And I know you say Justin Fields had an incredible game, maybe not statistic-wise, but he almost had a chance to win that game for his team. And they put on an incredible show up in New York today. I'm having trouble hearing you, Scott. Not sure if you can hear me as well. Go ahead, try again, Scott. Still can't hear you. Still not getting you. I don't know what's going on. Nope. Oh, I got you now.
Understand.
I got you now.
Is it working now? Can you hear me?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
Like a 20-second delay, your mouth moves and then there's words and then it freezes. We might not be able to do this. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. Let me try a couple of things here. I'm gonna pop off real quick from the screen. You go ahead and tell me about what your thoughts are on the Jets and the Steelers game today, and I'll see if I can make some adjustments behind the scenes.
Yeah, that was definitely the Jets Steelers game. That first game this afternoon was definitely one of the best games of the day. Aaron Rodgers came out and it looked like he went back in time a little bit. Came out, looked really sharp, threw 4 touchdowns, was looking mobile, looked really, really well on his end. And that Steelers offense was moving the ball up and down the field. And then on the Jets side, Justin Fields looked like the quarterback that everybody's been kind of waiting for him to become at the pro level. His accuracy was good. He was moving around in the pocket. He was able to run. He was making smart decisions. It just looked really, really good on both sides offensively. Both defenses struggled a little bit, but both teams were able to move the ball. The Jets were able to run the ball really well. The Steelers, like I said, Rodgers was throwing the ball really well, using his tight ends well, his wide receivers. He had a good mixture going on there as well. And then, the game kind of went back and forth with both teams being able to score, neither defense really able to slow either one down. The Jets had a lead, then fumbled a kick that kind of set the Steelers up to take the lead in that game. They did. The Jets came back. The Steelers went back up again. It came down to the very end of the game. Jets up by a point. Steelers driving. They kick a 60-yard field goal that's good. That gives the Steelers the 2-point lead. And then the Jets get the ball back again with about 45 seconds left. And they're driving down the field. 4th down. Fields scrambles around, throws a pass to Garrett Wilson that would be a first down, but Jalen Ramsey comes up and puts an unbelievable hit on him, jars the ball loose, knocks it away, and the Steelers end up winning that game on a really nice play. I mean, Ramsey lit him up. I mean, he lifted him off the ground on that tackle to jar the ball loose from Wilson and secure that win for the Steelers. Otherwise, the Jets probably get that first down and are closing in on field goal range and the possibility of a last-second win.
Well, as we saw later on in the afternoon slate, a game-winning kick wasn't necessarily a guarantee. We saw a couple of missed kicks in the final 2.5 minutes of a couple of games that could have flipped the script. You look at Cleveland had a chance against Cincinnati, and then the end of that Tampa Bay Atlanta game as well, a game-winning kick by Koo goes wide, and that's a couple missed kicks early in the season, and not a good tone to set for some of those teams. I mean, obviously Cleveland could have won that game. Tampa and Atlanta would have gone to overtime at that point. But when you look at that, a couple of teams escaped with victories this week.
Yeah, you look at that Cleveland game, Joe Burrow wasn't able to have much of a connection with either one of his wide receivers. You look at the number that Higgins and Chase put up, and a lot of fantasy owners were pretty disappointed today because neither one of them did much. I think Higgins had 25 receiving yards and Chase had 33, something along those lines. It was not a good game for those guys if you're a fantasy owner with either one of those guys, but the Bengals found a way to escape their nemesis because they've really struggled in the Joe Burrow era to be able to beat the Browns. So for them to escape that game with their offense not really in sync and beat Cleveland is huge for them. And then we saw some games that were just ugly. Let's talk about that Green Bay Detroit game real quick, can we? Because
we certainly can.
The Lions' offensive line's got to figure it out really quickly. I know they had 3 new starters today, but those guys look like they had never played football before. I mean, they look like they didn't know the blocking schemes. I don't know how many times I watched the center of the guard pull out, and they totally whiffed on the guy they were supposed to block and blocked nobody. And the guy went in the backfield untouched and either harassed Goff or tackled one of the running backs in the backfield. It was a really, really ugly day for the Lions in their debut for their new offensive coordinator. And, it just didn't look pretty. And Micah Parsons and the Packers defense looked pretty scary today. Parsons didn't play a whole lot, although he played more snaps than I think a lot of people thought he was going to. And he did end up with his first sack late in the game. But overall, that Packers defense looked really fast and really aggressive today.
Well, and I think the biggest question mark that we've talked about coming into this season was for Detroit, especially the fact that you didn't just lose your offensive coordinator, you lost both your offensive and defensive coordinator. So you're in a tough division. Obviously, Green Bay improved defensively. I'm not going to sit there and say they were a Micah Parsons away from being the absolute best team in that division, but it definitely helps. You got a Chicago team that's potentially on the rise. We're going to get a chance to see them tomorrow night. And then you got a Minnesota team that has question marks. Obviously, you're going to be starting a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, but still a team that can make some noise in there. And you just lose your two coordinators. Where are you going to fit into this division? And at least in week one, it looks like there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Detroit. And on the flip side for Green Bay, I mean, you had question marks about Jordan Love kind of coming into this season. Was he going to be able to kind of continue to improve as his years have gone on? Looked really, really good today. Running game still not really that great. Just 66 yards for Josh Jacobs. He did score a touchdown. It's going to have to be something that is looked at as far as the offense is concerned for Green Bay. You're not going to be able to win the division with just a stellar defense. They're going to have to improve offensively. Yes, they had 5 guys with 10 plus yards receiving, but nobody was even close to 100 yards receiving. So yeah, it's great that they're spreading it around, but they don't have that one guy that's going to stand out and be the guy to lead that offense. And I think that's something that Jordan Love needs. And it could be, I know it's week one, but it's really going to be interesting to see what maybe trade targets might be out there for Green Bay if we go a couple more weeks and you see the same sort of numbers, even if they do get wins.
Yeah, I don't see the Packers going out and trading for a wide receiver. I mean, it was a shock that they drafted one in the first round, in Golden this year. So I don't see them doing that. I think they've got a young receiving core. I think they're hoping that Dobbs kind of steps up and becomes the number one guy there. But, like you said, they've got numbers at wide receiver. You've got 3 or 4 guys that are young that everybody's going to get opportunities to prove that they can be that number one guy. And it's just going to be a receiver core, and you may see different guys lead the team in receiving each week. I think that's just kind of going to be how they do it. And, they brought Micah Parsons in there for a reason. They're going to lean on that defense, and their defense was pretty good last year. He's going to make it that much better, and I think they're going to lean on that defense, and then your offense is going to be okay. Don't make mistakes, kind of be careful out there. And we're going to lean on our running game a lot, expect Jacobs to kind of carry the load there, and Jordan Love make throws, but be smart with the ball and don't cost us games is kind of the way I think that offense is going to run. And then going back to the Lions, while I say that their offensive line looked awful today, like they hadn't played football, again, you bring 3 new guys in, especially when you got a new starter at center and guard, you're going to have some issues, and you have the new offensive coordinator and you're trying to figure out all those wrinkles and everything. So, I mean, the Lions team we saw today is going to be vastly different than what we see in 2 or 3 weeks. They're going to get better. I still think they're one of the top teams in that division, if not still the top team. And, the defense too, Aiden Hutchinson was out there for the first time, in almost a year, basically, because it was week 7 that he got hurt last year. So, I mean, he's still kind of shaking the rust off, and they had a couple of other people hurt on that defense. So, the Lions will round in shape. And we saw a lot of teams, Aaron Rodgers said that in the game, in the interview on the field, that, there's a lot of tape from week 1 that's going to be ugly because teams are still trying to figure it out, especially when teams don't play in the preseason, and we've seen that the last few years. Used to be that teams got out there and you ran the rust off during preseason. Everybody played at least a couple of games. Now nobody plays in the preseason. And so week 1 and 2, and sometimes week 3 are almost the preseason, when the regular season starts, for guys to shake that rust off before you really know what a team's going to look like. It might be week 4, week 5, which, kind of really makes every game more important as you go down the stretch. If you're using those first few games as your preseason, basically.
And especially in a division such as the NFC North, where all 4 teams have on paper a legitimate chance of winning that division. The divisional games are going to be vitally important this year, and for the Packers to win the first divisional game, to put them up on top of the division right now is big, but they're going to have to continue to win tough NFC North games, and you're going to be playing this Detroit team in Detroit later on in the season as well. So it could definitely flip the script in a couple of weeks for sure. And looking at week 1, I mean, it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to kind of judge what kind of teams are going to stand out and which ones maybe are going to falter a little bit, because it is that week 1, week 2 of getting back into it. But I think most of the scores that we saw today kind of shook out for the teams that we thought were going to win. The teams that we expected to be. Denver won, San Francisco won. We both picked the Texans, but I don't think we were surprised that the Rams were able to win that game today against Houston because it was in LA. So that's another one that was won. Jacksonville won today. Washington won today. Arizona, we thought was going to win, and obviously going up against Spencer Rattler, they had a better chance. But the one that really, I think, shocked not just you and I, but I think a lot of people in the NFL was the Miami-Indianapolis game in Indianapolis. Daniel Jones at quarterback, first time in for Indianapolis, had a pretty solid game, 22 of 29 for 272 and a touchdown. But it was more so, I think, just kind of the implosion of Miami than it was more of what Indianapolis did that was the shock. It just looked like Miami didn't have any preparation in the offseason, even not having played a whole bunch during the preseason. They didn't even look like they showed up for camp. That's how bad they looked in this game.
Yeah, it is very disturbing if you're a Dolphins fan. And we know there's things going on behind the scenes in Miami. The relationship between Tua and Tyreek is not good. And there were rumors that they may trade Tyreek because apparently the two of them are not even communicating away from the field, and barely at practice or on the field or in the locker room or anything else. So, that's a problem when your number one wide receiver and your number one quarterback are not on the same page. And apparently a lot of it has to do with things that are going on away from football that have caused the rift between the two of them. So, that's a problem. And then, your defense is kind of iffy. That's been the problem in Miami the last few years. You haven't been able to figure that out. You traded Jalen Ramsey for Minkah Fitzpatrick, which I don't really understand how that fixed anything because you traded a corner for a safety. So you really haven't really changed a whole lot on your defense. And you got older because Ramsey's a little bit younger than Fitzpatrick is at this point. So that was an odd thing. So it's going to be interesting to watch the Dolphins and just see, because I think what we saw today, if it's an example of what things to come, the Jets are going to be a team you're going to have to watch out for this year. There's some talent on that Jets team. So, they could make things difficult in Miami. A lot of people are expecting big things out of New England today, although, that was kind of a surprise that the Raiders went into New England and beat them today, kind of handedly, honestly. So, that makes you wonder exactly where Mike Vrabel and the Patriots are. Again, it's week 1. We're going to see all kinds of weird things happen in the first couple of weeks, like we just talked about, because teams aren't really up to snuff quite yet. And, we saw that in the first 2 games on Thursday and Friday. I mean, we can't really talk about football and not talk about Spitgate, can we?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I was actually waiting to get you on to talk about it because, I mean, obviously with your fandom of the Dallas Cowboys and that being a divisional game and just the craziness, like how you get an ejection before the first snap of the season, the best player on Philadelphia, and he gets kicked out of the game. I mean, what was going through his mind? I mean, obviously we saw the replays later that showed Dak spit first, but it was at the ground. And then I don't know, man. I mean, I want your take on it because I was calling volleyball that night, so I wasn't entirely into the game until after it got into the second half. But you were seeing it. What was going through your mind when that happened?
It was crazy. It was like, wait a minute, what just happened? I mean, first of all, you can't let that happen because you're one of the most important players on your team defensively. You're a game changer when you're on the field defensively, and you basically not only embarrassed yourself, but you embarrassed your teammates, and you let your team down. Having said that, watching the replay, absolutely, there's no question that Dak honestly started this whole thing. We're never going to know what was said, but, he was a couple of yards. They were a couple of yards away from each other. There was an injury on the opening play, so there was an Eagle player down, and something happened to make him walk over towards Dak. Dak had said something. He walked over that way, and then you see Dak spit at the ground, but in his direction. and say a couple of words and then have the biggest smile on his face that you've ever seen. So you know that he said something to try to get under his skin. And unfortunately for the Eagles, it worked, and you just can't let that happen at that point. And there was some talk that maybe he would get suspended this week. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen. It sounds like the league is going to let him play against the Chiefs this Sunday, but it sounds like he's facing a very, very heavy fine. And you just got to be smarter than that. Again, like we said, Dak went, hey, I'm going to see if I can get underneath this guy's skin, and he did it. So as much as I don't like giving Dak credit for much of anything, because he's, we know my feelings about Dak Prescott, you have to give him some credit there because he gave his team an advantage before the game even started. Of course, then once the game started and, you had chances to win, you found ways to blow it because, Dak threw a couple of bad balls and CeeDee Lamb had a couple of balls hit him in the hands that apparently he can't catch, even though he's supposed to be the best wide receiver in the league, according to him. The Cowboys found a way to.
I found this, and that's exactly what it reminded me of is when you said that. I spit in your general direction.
Yeah, totally, just totally got under his skin and made it work. And it's something that like we said, you just can't let that happen if you're a professional athlete, and especially a guy who's that important to your team. Because we saw as that game went on, the Eagles really missed his presence. The Cowboys, who weren't able to run at all last year, were able to run all over that Eagles defense on Thursday night. And, you watch that game and, the biggest key to the Eagles last year was how good that defense was. I mean, we think about how dominant they were in the postseason, what they did to Washington and the NFC Championship game, and then what they did to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And watching that and then watching what we saw on the field on Thursday night, it didn't even look like a shell or a shadow of that Super Bowl championship defense.
Well, we were talking at about halftime of that game on Thursday, and at the time it was 21-20, and I threw the quip out there that this is either going to be no more scores in the game, or it's going to be a 60-57, 58 final, and almost was the former, which just a field goal in the second half for Philadelphia. So both defenses kind of stepped up a little bit in the second half, which is good to see. But at the same time, both offenses kind of struggled a little bit as well. So when you look at that and you see, there's a little excitement around the Giants this year. And I think there's not enough talk about Washington in that division. I mean, if you're Philadelphia, are you worried a little bit about what this season can bring? Because Dallas pushed you. Washington was a thorn in your side last year, and the Giants might have gotten a little bit better. I mean, not to say that Philadelphia is not going to win the division probably, but it maybe not as easy as they expect.
I'm sorry, I lost you for those that last sentence.
Oh, I was just saying,
what was that?
what does Philadelphia expect this season with Washington being a thorn in their side, Dallas pushing them to the limit, and the Giants probably improving a little bit from last year?
Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Yeah, I got you frozen on my end. Hmm. Well, we may still be having some technical difficulties. So, oh, wait, do I have you back now? Whoop. Maybe not. Maybe not. So I'll just give my take on this. I look at it and I if I'm Philadelphia, I'm a little worried. I mean, obviously the tush push is something that they are still, known for, and it will get them the ability to extend drives. But the thing that scares me is that I don't know if Jalen Hurts has the ability to get the ball to his receivers, because AJ Brown was very rarely targeted on Thursday night. The biggest playmaker in the offense is Saquon Barkley, and we saw it with the Chiefs a little bit. If you can't get the run game going, then you're not going to be able to get the passing game going. Well, for the Eagles, you get the run game going, but you're not going to move into the passing game, and that's something that I think they still question with Jalen Hurts, is his ability to throw the ball downfield to his receivers and get them involved. So we'll have to see if the Eagles find some offensive answers next week before their next game. And for the Chiefs, we knew that going into this season, the AFC West was going to be a juggernaut again. And even that's with the Raiders and not knowing what exactly they were going to be, with, Pete Carroll coming back into the league and Geno Smith under center. And Smith had a great couple years in Seattle. And I think he answered a lot of questions about his career. And for Kansas City, losing not only Rashee Rice for the first 6 because of off-season issues, and there's no sugarcoating that. It was another poor decision by a young wide receiver. And then losing Xavier Worthy early in that game when Kelsey runs into him and basically dislocates his shoulder. You look at Kansas City, and it was going to be a tough sell for them to essentially win the division once more. And the Chargers showed on Friday night that they are going to be a force in the AFC West. And that's not even to sit there and say that Denver wasn't the one going into the season that people were going to look at and go, yeah, they have a chance to challenge. I think you look at the Chargers and go, the Chargers are the team that really is going to challenge the Chiefs this year, because they've got the stud quarterback. They're putting together a running game, and they've got veteran receivers that know how to go about winning games. And I think that's the thing. As long as those receivers can stay healthy, I think the Chargers are the one that really pushes Kansas City in the AFC West this year.
No, I totally agree with you. I think they are definitely the team that you have to worry about. I mean, especially watching the way they played on Thursday night. Justin Herbert looked like he felt comfortable in that game and looked like he was totally in control, which is really scary if you're a Chiefs fan, if he's finally figuring it out, because he's been the guy that, so many NFL experts have been expecting to be the next big star at quarterback. And so if they figure it out, their defense is solid and their running game gets going, and then, like you said, bringing back a veteran like a Keenan Allen to help Alad McConkey and some of those young receivers that they have, they could really definitely be the team that challenges the Chiefs. And then you have to watch out for Denver too. I mean, they didn't look terrific today, but they've got a good defense. And if Bo Nix can figure things out, they can also make a run. And then, as crazy as it is to say, with Pete Carroll and Max Crosby, and, they've got a tight end and they've got a running back, the Raiders are not going to be a team that you can just walk all over this year either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree. And then we talked about the NFC North being a division that can be incredibly tough. The West is going to be incredibly tough as well. I like the youth that I see in places like Denver and with the Chargers, but I also like, the veteran leadership in Las Vegas with Geno Smith. And like I said, I wasn't sure what to expect with Pete Carroll coming back into the league, but he is a veteran coach that has the experience, and he can get a team ready to go just like that. And you give him a stud running back that can bring the thunder, like I don't know, a Marshawn Lynch did, and you just have a game managing quarterback. Sounds very familiar to what he had in Seattle with Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, it kind of is. Ashton Genty is going to be the next probably real stud running back. So that's a weapon. And then, like you said, the tight end, with the tight they have, the kid from Georgia, who's becoming one of the best tight ends in the league already. And just, this was the start of his second season. When you have that, and then, you've got a couple of young wide receivers that you brought in, and then, your defense is starting to become stout, and you've got a guy like Max Crosby that can disrupt a quarterback and disrupt an offense just with the pressure and the chaos that he can bring. They can definitely be a team that makes some noise. I'm not saying that they're a playoff team right now, but they're definitely a team they can disrupt some things and surprise some people. And like I said, I did not expect them to go to New England today and win. And they won pretty handily. They beat up on the Patriots, which everybody is so high on Drake May, and they held the Patriots to 10 points today. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward.
Yeah, and I think the mystique in New England is now essentially gone. There's no fear going into New England anymore without the Belichick, without the Brady or any of that stuff. Even with Vrabel being there, it may take a couple of years for him to maybe build that back up. But right now, there's no fear for a team to go into New England and not feel like they can come away with a victory.
Yeah, they're a team that's interesting because I kind of feel the same way. And then you listen to some of the national pundits, and they have the Patriots as a borderline playoff team. So a lot of people are picking them as a surprise AFC playoff team. So, I guess it's kind of what your expectations are. Maybe some of those guys are a little too much on Mike Vrabel this early, and Drake May just being, the start of his second season as well. And, you look at that and you go, man, I don't know, because he doesn't have a whole lot of weapons. I mean, yeah, they brought Stephon Diggs back up there, but what is Stephon Diggs at this point, to be your number one receiver?
Yeah, I think that's always been their concern in New England is the wide receiver core. I mean, they've had running backs, they've had decent defenses. It's always been that they've never been able to find that receiver that has really taken hold. I mean, really since Randy Moss, and Randy Moss was at the time kind of near the end of his career. So it wasn't like he was a young receiver coming in and rising up in New England. They just haven't been able to find that. So at the same time, the national pundits are high on New England because Bill Belichick is still out there, and he probably still has his fingers on the pulse of the national media, and they don't want to upset him because, it's Bill Belichick. He's 0-2 at North Carolina and run by a 24-year-old girl.
Well, right. And, sometimes the national pundits say stuff just to get reactions. I don't know if you heard Dan Orlovsky say that what's going on in Philadelphia with Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, that they're this generation's Belichick and Brady. Didn't even mention Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. He's jumped to the Eagles, and the Eagles are this generation's Brady and Belichick. It's like, wait, they won one Super Bowl and they've been to two. The Chiefs have been to 7 straight AFC Championships games, but we're not even going to talk about that.
He doesn't want to jump on the prohibitive favorite. I mean, it's not like he ran out of the back of the end zone or anything. I mean, he has great decision making. All right, let's jump over and talk college football real quick. We had a pretty big game yesterday down in Columbia, Missouri, and looking behind you, Scott, I think I know which way you were leaning going into that game. And after that game, I think a lot of people had some questions answered, especially considering how the first quarter and a half went for the Tigers. And I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of got that, here we go again feeling after it became 21-6. But huge credit to Coach Drink, his team, his coaching staff, and the fans down at Faurot Field that were able to kind of turn the tide in that one and come away with a very convincing victory over Kansas.
They really did. And you know what's funny is, that game went 21-6 so quick. Mizzou jumped out to that 6-0 lead, and then all of a sudden it was 21-6 Kansas. And I was like, you know what? I'm not panicking. I'm not worried. I was like, just play your game, and I think you're going to be fine, because I think this offense is really, really good. When you look at what the offensive line has done in the first 2 weeks, you look at the two running backs that they have that are both just beasts. I mean, you have power and speed in both of those guys. They can run past people, or they can absolutely run over people. And we saw that, multiple times later on in that game yesterday. And then you have multiple weapons at the receiving core. Kevin Coleman came in and has lived up to expectations. And I was telling somebody I covered Kevin Coleman quite a bit when he was at St. Mary's in high school. And I can remember doing a couple of games when St. Mary's played St. Francis Borgia out in Washington or in St. Louis, and talking to Borgia's head coach, Dale Gildehouse, afterwards, and talking to him in the last couple of years while Coleman was finishing high school and in college. And he was like, I still have nightmares of that little jitterbug out there running up and down the field against us, because nobody could catch him and nobody could tackle him. And, he showed a lot of that yesterday. And then, a thing that Mizzou's offense missed, we talk about Mizzou's offense last year, and we talk about the fact that Brady was hurt a lot, and, they missed a little bit of the running game. A big weapon that we didn't talk enough about that was hurt most of the year last year and was a huge part of the offense 2 years ago and couldn't stay healthy last year, just had nagging injuries that kept knocking him out. Brett Norfleet is one of the best tight ends in college football, and he showed it again last night. There's a reason that he was a freshman All-American, and, last year just couldn't stay healthy, tried to play through it, missed some games, just wasn't the same guy. We saw the Norfleet of 2 years ago yesterday with the 2 touchdown catches and the big one where he was wide open and just flew down the sideline. And we saw him hurdle a guy earlier in the game to get a first down. And, he's back and healthy. And that's a huge, huge weapon, both in the pass game and the run game, because he's a really good run blocker. He's just a very, very talented all-around tight end, and another St. Louis kid that's making a huge contribution in Columbia.
Yeah, 100%. And, you normally don't hear a coach kind of talk their team up this early, but just listening to Coach Drink after yesterday's game, he was talking his team up, but also trying to temper expectations as well, because you look at this offense, and this is the first time in the last handful of years, especially in Coach Drink's turn, that they've had everything offensively. You've got a quarterback that's mobile, accurate, and strong. You've got running backs that, like you said, can do a little bit of everything, either power it through or hit the speed. You've got wide receivers that can make plays, including freshmen that are making incredible catches. You've got tight ends that make offensive plays and help in the blocking game. You've got an offensive line that is stout. They open up holes. They protect the quarterback. They have everything you need offensively to make a run for a playoff spot in the national championship at that. And then you look over at the defense, and the defense is in that mode too, although did struggle a little bit against KU yesterday. There were some moments, but as they got deeper into that game, they got stronger. And it was more so a matter of them just getting themselves into the game, I think. And once they were understanding what KU was doing offensively, they're like, oh, we got this. I mean, the pick that sealed the game, unbelievable play. I mean, not just the ability to concentrate and pick that ball off, but then to have the wherewithal to drag that outside foot just enough to make it a completed interception. I am thoroughly impressed with what I see from Mizzou. And again, as a Tigers fan, you look at it and you go, it's great, but when's the other shoe going to drop? And I hope that doesn't happen this year, because I don't want to be proven right that something is going to happen that prevents Mizzou from maybe going as far as they possibly can. But looking at what they've got right now, they've got a real shot.
They absolutely do. I think, you look at this team, and it might be a better all-around team than the team 2 years ago that beat Ohio State and went 11-1.
Last team in the SEC
all around, they may be better because you've got. I'm sorry?
the last SEC team.
You're right.
Beat
They
Ohio
are the last
State.
team to beat Ohio State. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. That doesn't get enough publicity. We need to be screaming that from the rooftops. But yeah, I think this team all around is better. There wasn't as much hype going in because nobody was exactly sure what Bo Prabula was as a passer. Which, I mean, after 2 weeks, you have to be pretty darn impressed because it looks like he can make every throw, and he's got accuracy. He can throw the deep ball. He's got touch. He's done everything. We can see that he can run. So that's exciting. And then this defense is really, really stout. Yeah, I know Kansas got 21 points, but we got to remember that 7 of them came off of a fumble, and there were a couple of fluke little plays there in that first quarter that I think Mizzou's defense was kind of caught up in all of the atmosphere, and you got off to that quick lead, and I think everybody was just super fired up, and I think they kind of got lax a little bit in that first quarter, and then you saw them really settle down. And other than that one drive in the fourth quarter that Kansas marched down the field, and their quarterback made 2 or 3 unbelievable plays, almost was Superman, as the announcers had said he needed to be to get them back into that. Mizzou had that happen. Kansas went on that drive, and then Mizzou's defense settled back in again. I think they held Kansas to, going into late in the fourth quarter, they'd held them to 7 yards rushing in that game. Their defense played really well. They didn't get as much of a pass rush yesterday as we saw in the first game, but part of that is because of the fact that you were playing a mobile quarterback and you were using those defensive ends to kind of spy and try to keep him contained as much as possible. But, with what they've got a really talented defensive line. They've got a really talented linebacker core. And I'm sorry, but Trotter's going to be just a beast. I mean, he reminds me so much of watching his dad when Jeremiah played for the Eagles. I mean, he's got that same body type. He's just got that same speed and explosiveness. And then Mizzou's got a really solid secondary. So, like I said, I think in a lot of ways this team is more of a complete team than the team 2 years ago that was not very far away from being able to play in a national championship game. I think this team has the potential to be better because, while that team had an unbelievable running back in Cody Schrader who led the SEC and was, just unreal. You've got 2 running backs that have the potential to do that this year. So, you don't have that one guy that you have to count on and wear down. You've got depth at wide receiver like we talked about. You've got seniors. You've got freshmen stepping up. You're seeing some of the guys come through, Manning and Blood, and some of these guys step up that, are sophomores and juniors now that are moving into those roles. And so, this team is just dangerous. And, this week is going to be really interesting because you play Louisiana. So, that's a game that, could be ugly. You could, that could be another 45-50 to 3, 50-7 type game. And then you've got a big one because then you've got number 9 South Carolina coming in. And that's the game that if you win this week and South Carolina comes in next in 2 weeks, that could very well be a 6 o'clock ESPN game or potentially even the 6:30 game on ABC as the biggest game of the week. I mean, we talked about, it was cool. We had SC Nation and we had Good Morning America and we had 2 or 3 pregame shows in, but where was College Game Day? If you win this week and South Carolina wins, there's a possibility you get College Game Day coming to Columbia in a couple of weeks.
That would be incredible. And the atmosphere that we saw yesterday was great. It's only going to get better when you got the biggest show in college football coming down to where you play. And yeah, looking at the schedule, I mean, coming into the season, you looked at it and you go, well, what are the games that you're going to pick out? I mean, obviously Alabama at home is a big one. Auburn's always big. Texas A&M's big. And then you got the game against Oklahoma, which is big. But the fact that South Carolina is probably the one that you look at and you go, that might be the biggest game of the year because Alabama's not like they've been in years past. Auburn, not sure. I mean, when you get to that point, you're heading down to Auburn. That's always going to be a tough place to play. Texas A&M, right now, they look good, but who's to say they're not going to falter? And then Oklahoma's the same way. I mean, they looked a little bit as well. The thing that there's 2 things that scare me that make me go, oh, we got to be, again, cautiously optimistic is you've got this week, which you've got to get through. You cannot overlook Louisiana. Then you've got a big game at home against South Carolina. Then you've got the trap game at home against UMass before you host Alabama on October 11th. That stretch right there could trip this team up. And I hope it doesn't, because we've seen it too much in the past and it would just be deja vu all over again. The other thing that scares me is the fact that 6 home games to start the season, and your first road game is at Auburn. That's another one. Again, could be a letdown if you get through Alabama undefeated, and then your first road game is at Auburn. That's another thing that really, really scares me. And then obviously after that, you go to Vandy, and you never play well against Vandy for some reason. So you look at it and you go, there's still a lot of tripping points for this team, but you get through Vandy, all of a sudden you're talking national championship contender.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the potential for that. The Oklahoma game, I think, looks like a bigger game now after watching them play Michigan yesterday and how they played and how their quarterback played. Oklahoma looks better than I thought they were going to be. So that's a team that's going to scare you, and, the Mizzou-Oklahoma rivalry, we all remember the dark years in Columbia when Oklahoma would come in and beat them 70-0. And we remember the exhaustion when they beat Oklahoma on primetime football on a Saturday night in Columbia in 2008. And that place went absolutely insane. And the goalpost got carried down to Harpo's and was in the parking lot for a lot of festivities. Things like that happen. So that rivalry will be there. Something Mizzou fans need to think about, because people are going to look at Mizzou's schedule and go, well, you're not playing LSU. You're not playing Georgia this year. You're not playing some of those cream of the crop SEC teams. Alabama's down, ranked. So that game looks really good. You hope Auburn plays really well, continues to play well. The game that, it kills me to say this, and I'm so happy that we won yesterday, but the team that we need to play really well and make a run now in the Big 12 to really build up our resume is Kansas. Because we need Kansas if Kansas could get to the Big 12 championship game, then that makes Mizzou's resume look that much better. So as much as I hate saying this, in a way, we need to root for Kansas for the rest of the year.
And the thing of it is you look at Kansas and you wanted to beat them yesterday, but they show that they're a pretty good team. So that is only going to help your resume. And in a Big 12 that's down, getting them to a Big 12 championship game would be huge. So, definitely hate the Jayhawks yesterday. Quietly root for them the rest of the year and hope you don't see them in the playoffs later on this season. So, yes, you can be a closeted Jayhawk fan for the next couple of months, Mizzou fans. It's perfectly fine and acceptable. Mizzou did get into the top 25 when it was released today. They are sitting at number 25. That number will surely go up as they continue on this season. A team, though, that is somewhat of a quiet surprise locally, Illinois. They are sitting now at number 9 in the latest poll. They had a big-time victory over Duke yesterday. That's a team that, with everybody here being huge Mizzou fans, I think is going to get a little bit lost in the shuffle. They're a team that could potentially make some noise as well this year.
They are. That's a good team. It's a veteran team. Although I know you had other things going on. You were doing other games and stuff. Illinois had a fight on their hands in that first half with Duke. That game was tied at one point, and then Duke turned the ball over 5 times in the second half, and Illinois took advantage of it and blew them out. But they're a really veteran team. They're a really physical team. They're going to be a handful in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is top heavy. Ohio State's really good, Oregon's really good, Penn State's really good. The rest of the conference, not that strong. So Illinois' schedule is kind of funky, a little bit like Mizzou's. They've got a couple of tough games, but it's not a killer schedule. You can see a potential where Illinois is undefeated going up against Ohio State, and we saw them play Ohio State really well a couple of years ago. If they go into Ohio State and can give Ohio State a game, Illinois is a team that gets through that. Maybe you lose 1 game, 2 games. Maybe they're playing in the Big Ten championship. And, wouldn't it be cool if you had Mizzou and Illinois both in the playoff? Would be crazy if you had Mizzou, Illinois, and Kansas, all 3 in the playoffs. And again, as much as we hate talking about Kansas, we remember how much fun the Big 12 championship game was in that 2008 season when Mizzou beat Kansas. Or not the championship game, but the game that made Mizzou number 1, that got them to the championship game. Imagine how insane it would be if you had a first-round playoff game in December against Kansas or Illinois in Columbia. Imagine what that atmosphere would be like.
That would be phenomenal and absolutely incredible. And the thing that we have to continue to remember is one loss doesn't keep you out of the playoffs anymore. I mean, 1 loss or 2 losses even doesn't keep you out of the playoff if you have some huge quality wins. So for a team like Illinois, if their only loss is to Ohio State and they played them close and they get to the Big Ten championship game, that does not preclude them from getting into the playoffs. So that's a possibility. Kansas is a possibility. Mizzou is a legit possibility of getting into the playoffs. And how crazy would that be? And how much more of a statement would that make for Midwestern sports if you had all 3 of those teams make the playoffs and teams like, USC?
It would be wild. It would be so much fun.
It would be incredible. It would be incredible. So lots of big games coming up in the college football scheme of things. So
it's gonna be crazy and it's gonna be fun. It's why we love college football.
Well, one last thing before we get out of here. We got to touch on the Cardinals. It's late in the season. Everybody's given up. Nobody's showing up to the games. The stadium's pretty much empty. And they go out and take 2 of 3 against one of the hottest teams in baseball in the San Francisco Giants. Oh, and guess what? This team is just 4.5 games back of a wild card spot. I know it's late in the season. I know we've pretty much given up. I know we've got some youth up here. I know our pitching hasn't been great. But holy crap, can they sneak into the playoffs?
We've been talking about this forever, it seems like. There's still a chance. Is it a good chance? No. But, yeah, there's a chance. The bad thing is if they sneak into the playoffs, who's on the roster? Because everybody's hurt. That's the crazy thing about this team is that they're doing this right now, and, you don't have Brendan Donovan, you don't have Alec Burleson, you don't have Nolan Arenado, you don't have – it's crazy. And real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but – think about this Cardinal team. We're talking about this. It's, they're right around 500. Yeah, they've got a shot at the playoffs. But think about what this team has been through this year. Lars Nootbaar, your left fielder, been on the disabled list twice. Victor Scott, your center fielder, been on the disabled list once. Walker, right fielder, been on the disabled list twice. Alec Burleson, your first baseman, outfielder, DH, disabled list. Nolan Arenado, been on your third baseman, been on the disabled list since basically the All-Star break. Mason Wynn on the disabled list twice, is playing but hurt now. Brendan Donovan basically been on the disabled list twice, basically been on the disabled list since the All-Star break. Nolan Gorman, your DH, second baseman, third baseman, been on the disabled list twice. Wilson Contreras, your first baseman, been on the disabled list twice, been suspended once. Ivan Herrera, your catcher, your other right-handed DH, been on the disabled list twice, missed 2 months. Pedro Pajes, your catcher, been on the disabled list. Joel Pozo, your backup catcher, been on the disabled list. Your number 2 pitcher, Eric Fetty, was awful. You moved on from him in July. Your closer and your setup guy, who are 2 of the best guys in baseball, both traded at the All-Star break. Sonny Gray, your best starter, not been that great this year. We're 4.5 games out of we're 500 and we're 4 games out of the playoff spot. How?
Is that an indictment on the National League? Because, there's no way that this team is in the position that they're in. And again, there's been some excitement. There's been a lot of head shaking, a lot of going, what the hell are they doing? And yet they're here. And they've got the remaining series is Seattle, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, San Francisco again, and then wrapping up in Chicago. So the likelihood that they're going to make a run and catch, 4 teams to make the playoffs is highly unlikely. But the fact that they put themselves in the position that they are in and are going up against a couple teams that they are chasing, it is absolutely crazy to think of. And I, for one, am going to passively watch the remainder of this season and see what happens. Look back at 2021. What was it, a 17-game win streak that got them into the playoffs? How many games we got left? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Oh, we've got 18 games left. What happens if you go on an 18-game win streak?
Well, if you go on an 18 now, you'd have it actually be at 20 because you won
Well,
the
that's
last
true.
two. So let's do that. Let's win 20 in a row. You know, it's almost impossible. It's probably not going to happen. But even if you don't get in the postseason, you have a chance to play spoiler. I mean, you can hurt Seattle's chances to get in this week. You could knock the Reds and the Giants both out of playoff spots if you beat them up, and you could hurt Milwaukee's seeding in the postseason. So you could definitely be a spoiler in these last 20 games. And like you said, if you get lucky and things break your way, who knows? But, I mean, like I was saying, with that list I was just running off, what team in baseball can have that many injuries, trade that many people, and still be in contention? I mean, as much as we want to rip this team, there's got to be some talent somewhere for this team to keep winning.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you listed that entire group, and that is pretty much your entire starting lineup. I mean, everybody in the starting lineup has missed time at some point this year, and then you throw on the top of that your two best relievers were traded, and one has continued to be pretty good, and the other one has somehow imploded. And he's definitely become a lot cheaper if the Cardinals want to bring it back next year. But that's the crazy thing is you look at it and you can piss and moan all you want about what Mo has done for this team. I got to look at what Ollie has done and go, okay, maybe we were a bit harsher on him than we had thought we were, because he's done a phenomenal job of keeping this team together and pointed in the same direction. Hasn't been infighting. There hasn't been, outside of the Contreras outburst in the suspension, all that stuff, but there hasn't been any of that. You haven't seen arguing between players. You haven't seen it. It's all been positive, even in the midst of the losing. And I have to give credit to Ollie.
Yeah, you do. I mean, he's done a good job the last couple of years of keeping these young guys, keeping their heads up, keeping them positive, because I mean, think about what they've gone through the last couple of years. A bunch of young players, they can pick up some really bad habits and pick up a losing mentality, a losing attitude that, oh, we're not very good. We're not going to, but they haven't done that. This team believes that they can win. And you can still see that they still believe they're going to find a way to win a lot of nights. And, there is, like we said, there is some really good talent on this team, in places. There's some spots that you need to go out and add to the talent, obviously, and
Rotation.
and reshape some things. But I'm sorry.
Rotation.
Oh yeah, that we could talk for 3 hours about what they need to do there in the offseason. And things are going to change, because like you said, we've got 20 days left of the Mo regime, and then he is going away. Some people don't want to believe that, but he is. Chaim Bloom is taking over, and you look and there have already been changes. They fired their minor league hitting instructor, that has been in charge of the minor league hitting process for the last few years, and they've made some changes otherwise in different positions in the minors. So the changes are coming, and it's going to be a crazy offseason in St. Louis. Let's just say that there are changes coming.
And we still haven't seen some of the youth that we thought we were going to see this year, and that might be a good thing. Not burning the Quinn Matthewses or the JJ Weatherholts, even though we wanted to see them and thought maybe that would bring some excitement, some fans into the stands. I think it's okay that we haven't seen them, especially considering they're making pushes in playoff races as well down in the minors.
Yeah, and you look at what the minor league teams are doing. Springfield's won 12 in a row now, and Memphis has won 8 in a row. So there is talent down there, and there's things to be positive about coming up in the next couple of years. I mean, we still, the Quinn Matthews and the JJ Weatherholts and all those guys are coming. So, stay positive. And like I said, there's going to be some big changes to this major league roster, over the winter at the winter meetings and when free agency starts and all of those things. So, I think the interest and the excitement around the Cardinals is going to pick up as we move through the winter months.
And that's what I want to hear. Well, that's going to wrap things up for us tonight. Thank you for sticking with us through all of the fun that we've had with its sports talk, the technical difficulties, all of that fun stuff. We got through it. We talked a lot about what's going on. Baltimore leading 27-13 over Buffalo. So our Bills pick is not looking great right now. But we'll be back with you guys next week. We'll talk about week 2 in the NFL. We'll recap the week that was in Cardinal baseball. We'll talk more college football. So much stuff to talk about in the coming weeks. And Scott, you got anything else before we head out tonight?
Nope. Everybody just enjoy football. Get ready for football next week and enjoy this weather that we've had, because we've got a couple more days of cool, and then it's supposed to get back in the 90s for 3 or 4 days. So enjoy this early taste of fall that we've gotten.
I could not agree more. Well, thanks for joining us. For Scott Tobin, I'm Michael Wagenknecht saying so long from the Toasted Tavern. We will see you next week.